Okay, well, let's get started. Jonathan's running just a little bit late, so let's get stuck in. So welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all. We're not expecting a big crowd today, so it's quite a nice opportunity to carry on from where we left off and to think about the topic of resourcing and how change and rapid change is affecting that. And as we were discussing last time, how we've come to this point where things mean more than time, how we got there, what we've lost, the way that we were affected by either having things or not having things, the value of things over thought and time with friends. I was joking with Jonathan yesterday that the next time I go to the hairdressers, I'm going to start the conversation with saying I got some fantastic cushions and cushion covers. Then I got some plates, and then I got a new leather belt, and unbelievably, I got something else and something else. Instead of saying, Carlos, had a fantastic conversation. We just had such a good time. We discussed all sorts of things that I'd never thought of before. Then Jonathan called, then Amy called, and the difference in that kind of conversation was quite striking from a joking perspective. But I just don't think I don't think I've had a conversation like that ever. Maybe for a car, maybe for something big. But imagine a world where we talked about things, not thoughts. It would be quite incredible. I wondered if anyone else had any sort of silly thoughts like that.
No, it's interesting because listening back to I had to leave, and luckily the emergency that happened was worse at the time than it ends up being afterwards. So I apologize for leaving early last time, but it was being able to go back and listen. And in case you didn't know, we do take all of these sessions and we put them up as podcasts on the augmentedsociety.org website. And it's fascinating. Even if we were in the conversation, it's still to be able to sort of relive it. And I'm sorry, Carlos, you've got sunshine on your face, which is a metaphor for something, I'm sure. But the fact that we started this session or this pair of sessions talking about resourcing change and how do we change all of the systems. And it turned quickly to a conversation comparing things and needs. And, there was one comment that was made, I think I made it about, instead of collecting things, I'm more interested in collecting experiences, or instead of having, I want to be doing more. And so the conversation took a shift, and listening to the conversation after I left, there was confusion. Like, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about what do we need? Or are we talking about how do we get things from point A to point B? And it really, it's two sides of the same coin almost. Because once we really refine what do we really need, then everything else just should follow. Because it's all about getting things to where they're actually needed, not where they're just forced. So I think that was sort of this meta concept that came out of that last conversation that I don't think any of us saw coming when we entered into the conversation. But I personally find that much more fascinating. And it follows that whole thing of water will find the place where it can escape. And it's, if we were to recalibrate our thinking as a society in terms of focusing on what do we really need, and based on those needs, things will be provided. Of course, it's so much easier said than done, but I think if that's the goal that we set ourselves for, it could be, we're going to have much more exciting, engaging, meaningful outcomes than if it's just, how do we shift moving these pieces from one country to another, or bypassing a traffic jam to get there, instead of, I'm in a traffic jam, I actually have an excuse to breathe, to sit and think, and perhaps meditate. All these types of things. I'm excited to see where we go with the conversation today, because we've got really a lot of people, everybody on this call. I really respect their insights, their backgrounds, and am enthused about what's to come in the next 51 minutes.
And in figuring out what we need, we can follow Macron, who's basically said the developed nations should take 3% of their allocation of vaccines and apply them to the 5 billion people in the less developed world, which is like, that's what we should be doing.
Yes.
It seems crazy. And even that is a huge step forward from where the developed nations are doing today, which is like, it's mine.
Can you say that again, Mitch? 3% of the vaccines?
Yeah, Macron said that as developed countries, we owe it to the rest of the world to provide them with vaccines also. So we all should take 3 to 5% of our vaccines and allocate it to the less developed countries.
For COVID or for all
COVID.
vaccines?
For
COVID.
Well, he's specifically talking about COVID, but it's a world health emergency, so we should be allocating. And I'm like, 3 to 5%, but they're 70% of the world.
Yeah, sorry, that took me a while to pick up on, Mitch. Sorry, that's how, my thinking didn't work there. Well, the world was moving that way, wasn't it? Wasn't it? The World Health Authority or World Health Organization, WTO.
Yeah, yes.
United
WHO.
Nations.
The World Trade Organization is completely different. They would say the opposite.
Right, I beg your
bring all the resources into one place. We will control all. Yes.
Yeah. So, is it going to happen? Isn't the current evidence in America reflecting the absolute opposite? But I know that wasn't what you were saying, Mitch.
Yeah, I was just saying that if we should have an equitable distribution of vaccines, is what, that's really my premise. And Macron's statement, which is so much better than what the developed countries are doing, is so inadequate when you think about, as you and Jonathan were saying, what do we all really need?
I would be interested too. I mean, when you're talking about resource allocation, I think the allocation of the immunization is a metaphor in and of itself, because we could each talk about how it was rolled out in our particular geographic areas, and I'm sure come up with a very different reflection of what, our local communities or our societies said was going to happen and then what actually happened. So, and who actually, I've been vaccinated. I don't know if any of you have had a chance, because I'm a teacher. But here in Las Vegas.
Amy, to that point, in Las Vegas, as a teacher, you get vaccinated. In Los Angeles, they still don't know when you're going to get vaccinated as a teacher.
In Missouri, it's the same way. It's the same way, and I guess I just wondered, where is it all of a sudden a state's issue versus
that was based on the last administration pushing it off on the states.
Right,
and now
but
the
it doesn't
trying to get it back.
It doesn't have to stay that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And right, because then, and I think scarcity, right? Doesn't scarcity have something to play in all of this? I think we have to think about that idea of scarcity. And if something's scarce, well, then how does that play into our willingness maybe to share to a greater degree, right?
Yeah.
So I would be fascinated to dream the impossible dream, see how we as individuals could get this mindset of governments, the mindset of the leaders of industry, where it's all, I'm going to get me mine. And like that whole fallacy of the trickle down. It's proven it doesn't work, but people still hold that in higher esteem than the Pledge of Allegiance in the U.S. As much as some people will say, my country first, and I don't need anybody else. The reality is whether you like it or not, we rely on everywhere around the world for everything. It's whether it's about products, whether it's about our environment, whether it's everything. And until we can get ourselves to think that way, and I think there are a lot of people that feel that way on the small scale, like, individuals talking to each other. I'm fascinated to see, how do you get that movement to form that realization? And I could geek out and talk about, the Federation and Star Trek, that it's not just all of Earth together, but it's Earth and other planets working together. That's what's, I can look at it as being extremely not possible or otherworldly to have that happen. But I'm also, being an optimist, excited to see what triggers that. And hopefully it's not some post-apocalyptic environment that leads to us working together.
But we briefly discussed the Dutch donut model.
Right.
And I've been researching it's obviously the same, but it's not a donut this time, it's a 360. I actually quite like donuts, so I'm going to stick with donuts.
Donuts are yummier than 360s,
Yeah,
just saying.
Circle, no. And how that's impacting the fashion industry. And the idea, Rianne, who was on a call with us a while ago, was talking about slow and permaculture, and how the fashion industry now is looking at product life cycle and a proper cycle, where companies like Eileen Fisher, for example, want their clothes back. There are models where they will actually pay to receive their clothing back. The idea of making much more customizable clothing that changes as it wears out, for example, clothing that can actually be biodegradable or better, repurposed, so that you extend the lifespan of an item. And what's really, I find very interesting about that is how, as a company, I create a relationship with my products. So the idea now and the ability to connect via a story. It's a very silly example, but I had a pillowcase that somebody gave me as a present when I was 4 years old. And it was from friends of my parents. They'd been to Australia. And it was only when I moved to America 4 years ago that I actually didn't bring the pillowcase. The pillowcase ended, unfortunately, but it was in brilliant condition. It was still a perfectly working pillowcase, and I loved it. I loved the pillowcase. And the growth of creating connections with items, giving you the ability to understand that that item isn't going to be throwawayable. Is it Miele or Melee, the white goods manufacturer? Their point is that their spare parts are available, and you should not, under any circumstances, be thinking about throwing that item away. So you give your washing machine a name, whatever name it happens to be, and you love it. And the fact that it didn't really get anything clean after 2 years wasn't the point. It was something that you used in your family, and that connection was huge. I think it's possible to return to that, where we have affection towards items and we save them. This mug has a painting of a friend of mine by a friend who died 2 years ago. I cherish that mug. Is it possible to move to that, to gain that circular existence for both, ourselves, our products, and our planet?
I'm receiving two messages. One, circular economy, and two, this connection with, well, we cannot longer call them things, because then we have a connection, and is the special mug or the beautiful pen or whatever. We are going to be in a circular economy in the future. But what I see, it's going to be in a long-term future. And maybe it will be too late. Well, right now it's too late, but that future is really long. So what we could do, what we could say, what we could write to speed up the process. So every company in the world has to get resources using circular economy, cradle to cradle, whatever name you want to put it, that we make it in a more sustainable way. So resource allocation will start changing if we use circular economy. And there is this TED talk by one of the founders of the Cradle to Cradle. I forgot his name, this architecture firm, big one, Donald something, that they review all the chemical materials. I don't know, like, I don't remember, like 11,000 are in the world or something, or 1,000. And they just start seeing which one were able to be part of a circular economy. And it was like 10%, something like that. The only ones that actually can be put in a circular economy. So that's a huge change in society, because then a lot of design of products, use of products will have to change. So what do we need as a society to really embrace circular economy? And I will say that as an outcome, another outcome will be what you were saying. People will start connecting more with whatever they use or have, and the have won't be a materialistic, but more a connectivity. I don't know how to say it.
Would that be something that Generation Z's more interested and able to articulate than anyone sitting here, do you think?
My daughter is a GZ, and it's very, and I am thinking right now when you were talking about her and her friends, they're in another dimension. But I don't know. It's a very interesting question.
I think it really comes down to change. Changing the way we think of things. Julie brought up in the last session about how she was able to go to the places in her area to get beautiful furniture that people didn't have a use for. And we look at how we're almost brought up to hold on to our heirlooms so we can pass them down. And part of the pandemic was making us realize maybe we don't need to hold on to those things. They're just things. So I had mentioned to Zoe, there's a show on Netflix that's called Next in Fashion, which is it's a fun fashion show. It's a fashion designer competition, which they did a really good job in producing it. But there was one of the finalists did a really fascinating thing, because at the beginning of each assignment, they would go into this room and pull fabric. So people would take entire bolts of fabric. Even if they only needed to make one small dress, they grabbed the entire bolt. So everything. And he said, I think his name was Daniel. He said, "Can I get your cast-offs?" And he took the cast-offs and sewed them together. And imagine if we were to do those types of things, it goes back to the vaccine. All these countries were like, where can I order the vaccines from? I need to get everything. Just give me whatever is on your shelf. We did that with toilet paper. Give me whatever is on your shelf. There's still people that have to wipe their butts so much, for 3 years now, until they go through that store of toilet paper they brought home.
Yeah.
So it's like rice and pasta as well.
Yeah. So it's like we don't have the systems in place to whenever you say reassign, everybody brings up socialism. So even bringing up Macron, in the States, everybody would say, oh, that's social, you're a socialist, as if it's a negative, because they're thinking of it in terms of negative, whatever. There are so many systems that we have in place that were meant to support these things. The problem is they never changed. When you look at agriculture in the States and how much money goes to farmers, that it's not in their best interest to farm, because they'll make less money by farming than taking what they'll get from the government.
I wanted just to go back when Amy, Julie, and I were working on our theme for the education paper. Amy, you were talking about a wonderful woman whose name I forget. Perhaps you can tell us about, who had the Native American Indian approach, where things did not exist.
Yeah.
Could you explain it?
So it was probably either Robin Wall Kimmerer or Eve Tuck, both of whom are Indigenous scholars. Robin's very well known, but Eve is not. But it's the idea that, first of all, your relationship with the land determines your relationship with everything. It ripples outward from your relationship with the land. And the idea that owning land is slavery, it's a form of slavery. Personal property should not exist. And if you think that you can own a tree or a river or a stream, then you're also going to ripple out and say, okay, I can own a human, I can own a mansion, I can own a car. So the idea that you want to consume more and more and more. And so I'm pretty heartened because in the last year, there have been quite a few in the United States groups that have actually gotten their land back. They got it back. And to me, that's one of the best things we as a culture in the United States can have happen, because they will care for the land. It is part of their culture and their being, almost every indigenous group in the United States. And then also it's a model for the rest of us of, just that basic respect, because kids, like Carlos was saying, my daughter's 14. These kids have grown up on YouTube unboxing videos. They've grown up on consumerism. And so as much as I, as a parent, want to counteract that, I mean, it's me against the world, to be honest with you. It's very, very challenging. And, we don't have a lot of money, but my children and I take trips every year. We try to emphasize experiences over things, and still it is a daily battle.
Just briefly going back to that, in one of the talks that one of the videos that you shared with us, I was most hit by the removal of the word it. So when approaching grandma, you couldn't say grandma was it, whereas the bowl she was holding was it. But what if the bowl wasn't it either? And I just thought that was create, a bowl as a they, not an it. I thought that was a fascinating thought process.
Yeah, and it goes down to the inherent worth and dignity of all sentient beings, every living, a plant, a tree. I mean, I often walk around and think, how am I treating these plants in my yard? Are my grandkids going to be like, wow, you enslaved the trees in your yard. You were such a taskmaster, because I don't greet them. I don't say hello to them. I don't acknowledge them. They're invisible to me.
Amy, let them leave. Let them free. Let them walk away.
We did befriend a squirrel recently, but that's a separate story.
It's interesting. I think that you could, if when talking about things or items or objects, if we were to recategorize them as forms of energy, right? So if everything is a form of energy, what would our perspective on everything be if we truly looked at it that way?
What do you mean?
I mean that if right now I say I'm a human, this is a table, that's a dog, and each one I treat with a different level of respect. But if I say I'm energy, this table, this stuff around me is energy, that like the other beings are energy, we're all equal. How is that going to change our output, our input, our way of being, if we look at everything that way?
Well, for one thing, we'll look at everything and say we are all 16 billion years old.
Yeah.
Right? Everything.
I'm really dumb for a 16 billion year old person.
No, well, I didn't mean it quite.
No, I know.
But basically, the materials that we're all made of, it's all 16 billion years old. We're all, we're just stardust, right?
There's a great Ian Brown track called "We're Stardust." Actually, it's lovely. Just if you want to listen to a nice piece of music. So I've started reading, and it's a bit late in the day, but Gary Shapiro's Ninja Futures, and in that, and I wonder if this has an impact, is how we shift around Donald Rumsfeld's grid of known knowns, unknown knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Have we moved squarely into the unknown unknowns yet? Because everything I'm reading now is not just about the pace of change, but it is with undoubted certainty the lack of certainty that is ruling. And is that an indication of the decline of this society? And are we just wasting our time now, and that we should just fill up our garages with as much as we can get our hands on? Because it's over. people, it's over.
I just keep thinking of the scenario. This is like we're on the aeroplane, it's going to crash, and it's always, put your mask on first if you want to save everybody else. But we put our masks on, but we don't save anyone else.
So you've already bought everything then, judging by your silence.
I got thinking about what Jonathan said, because that's another meeting about everything is energy and we are connected and we are all energy. And I think we are going there, but that will be another moment, but I would love to talk about that. And Lynn McTaggart's book called The Field, I think that's one of the key elements in what you just said, Jonathan. And that would be great. And that will have to do with your connection, Zoe, with things. But that will be going to another place as we started this conversation about how to allocate humanly resources. But I want to just put an asterisk that that's a topic that I would love to talk in the future.
I've written it down.
I agree. And it's like thinking of education. I mean, we don't really even teach the students to connect with themselves and center themselves and even be aware of their own bodies and their own energy and the energy of those around them. So it's kind of like, how could we as a society really realize how truly connected we are unless your parents brought you up that way, or you're going to church, or whatever else? Because in school it is so secular now. It's almost like, you're going to teach yoga and meditation, that's against my religion. I mean, just teaching the students to notice what's even going on with themselves and just their small world around them is not something that we have the time or the resources for.
Because we all have our own personal end goal. That's the focus, isn't it? Education. What is your focus? To get my qualification. My end goal is to get a job. That's what it's about, isn't it? It's just about tunnel vision. You don't have time for everyone else because you've got to focus on yourself, haven't you? You've got to get up that ladder.
Well, and in higher education, it's now that way more than ever before. Because it costs so much, right? Yeah, because exactly. How much higher education costs, that you want to get something out of what you're buying, basically. Yeah. I don't want to say like you're buying a degree. I don't mean that, but you're investing a lot of money. Yeah. And whenever you invest a lot of money, there's some expectation of a return on your investment.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, but somewhere in the marketing, we shifted that the ROI as being a financial value as opposed to a growth or personal value.
The humanity, so few students are going into the humanities. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's business or science right now that are great.
And I know Julie, and I'm sure it was Amy as well, but we've had conversations about the change in the dynamic, the relationship between you and your teacher, if there's money involved.
My students used to say to me, I pay your wages constantly. I pay your wages. Therefore, it's like fear of, if you fail them, they're like, well, I pay your wages, i.e., you don't change your grade and you're out of a job. I said, you don't pay my wages. The money goes on everything else, but you're not paying my wages. But they assume that because they're paying their fees, they're going to get a qualification, and they can dictate what qualification you're going to get.
I also
consumerism. It's all about money. Consumerism.
In the UK, when the fees, did they start at £6,000?
3,000, 6, then 9.
Right, but the universities felt compelled to go up with that, so that they were seen as valuable. It was a self-defeating chain.
Yeah, nobody went to the cheap. If you could pay £7,000 rather than 9, the £7,000 university wasn't as good. The £9,000 because you were paying more had to be better.
So the 12, the 15, the 20, the 75.
Yeah, because you're paying for a better service, aren't you? In theory, or so they think.
Again, back to value.
And that works with wine, by the way, also. People assume that if you're buying a $75 bottle of wine, that it's better than a $15 bottle of wine because you're paying more.
I wouldn't know.
I like that.
Or $2 Chuck for that matter.
Or $2 Chuck, which is no longer $2, but
I don't even know what that is.
Trader Joe's is a supermarket here in the States that decided 25, 30 years ago that they were going to take wine and sell it for $2 a bottle. And so it wasn't called $2 Chuck, but that was the name it took on. It ended up having a profound effect on the wine industry because of the fact that it brought more people into the appreciation of wine. And it really forged a middle ground. So it wasn't this whole hoity-toity, snooty thing where you had to be wealthy to drink wine in the States. And it also was supportive of bringing up the value of California, Washington wines in terms of being able to, they could then, you talk about the carry-on effect, because of sales like that, and because of being able to sell a bottle, whether it was $2, $7, $11, it meant that you were able to produce more. So therefore you were able to pay more growers for their grapes. So the vineyards got larger because there was the resource to be able to move that somewhere. And it's, I don't want to take away from capitalism or the better parts of capitalism or consumerism. I just wish that it was based in reality as opposed to crazy theories that the people that have a lot of money to put in the game are setting for us. It's, you know, it's beyond me. The stock exchanges around the world are doing phenomenally well, while on the ground, we're all talking about how much this pandemic has hurt us. There's a disconnect there that I wish I was the futurist that could truly see the future in certainty to say what the fallout of that is. Something's got to get us to connect. Again, it goes back to what do we really need? And then what's the value of those things that we really need? How do we get what is needed to the proper places?
So when money wasn't tied to an equivalent amount of gold or silver, money gained a different kind of value. And when we look back in history, it's not hard to see the times when that connection was disrupted, severed, and the results were painful for us all. That's I think, is that going to happen as we all move into the next few years? Is that likely? Hyperinflation, the metrics of value completely blown. Is that, am I just depressed? I'm sorry, but is that something that we should be thinking about?
I think we've got to, me and my wife have taken on the mantra of observe, don't absorb. And that has helped us and to keep depression at bay. Because as soon as you start seeing and reading, because we read a lot, where, you know, we've got access to so much data now, so much information, so much story. And if you allow yourself to be absorbed in the, oh my God, like, instead of just saying, oh, that happened, let's see how that plays out. And to your point, Zoe, it'll be interesting. Like I couldn't begin to answer that. And I think we're going to see it go up and down and up and down. And sometimes it's going to be really up and sometimes it's going to be really down. But looking at, I mean, something like when you talked about the divorce of currency from gold or silver or commodities, right? What are we looking at with Bitcoin now? That is completely devoid of tying to something physical. And it's at 50,000, over 50,000. And I remember when it was down at 3,500 and we were like, oh my God, this is crazy. And, you know, then it goes up to 7,000. Oh my God, this is crazy. Where does it end? And what is that piece that's going to be the reset? They've been talking about the stock market having the reset for over a year now. Is it co-ops? Is it breakdowns of systems?
Well, you know, is anybody else concerned about the, when you mentioned Bitcoin, I was thinking about the same thing when Zoe was talking there. And I think I'm more concerned about the shift to where there's no physical money. You know what I mean? With the gold and the silver thing, you know, first there's, pretty soon we won't have coins, we won't have paper, it's simply a transaction. I just think that that's strange.
It's a spreadsheet or a ledger.
Yes.
Right. Does it really exist? does it really exist?
Yeah, discovering when banks don't actually swap all the money around. They just
I used to think that they physically would like take
No.
Brinks truck, right? And when I was
Right.
young, and they would try. But it's like, you're right. I mean, what if your value, your monetary value, is nothing more than a spreadsheet, and something happens to the spreadsheet?
You look at what happened with Citibank and the fact that they moved $900,000 on behalf of a charity by accident, because it was the UI was confusing, and they were able to claw back all but 500,000 of it. And the court said, you're not entitled to that because that money was ultimately owed to whomever you paid it to begin with. So as we see this stuff, and that's, when we're talking about blockchain, that is supposed to even the playing field somewhat and make it so it's more democratic. Interestingly, we can't say it's democratic when so few percent of the people in the world have access to it, but it is what it is. There are systems that are being built right now that we can only hope that there's more that are for the greater good than for raising up the few, that will help us do better as a society using things like blockchain, using things, the more we become aware of the issues, the systems that we're playing in. That's the beauty of this past year, how BLM came into a different perspective and has had a much larger effect than when BLM started back in 2014, right? When we look at biases that are in place, when we look at the social networks and what they're able to do, it's with everything we've said with the pandemic, it has broken away all the cover or the facade that we willingly placed on the institutions that we were just merely players in.
But one thing, sorry, Jonathan, do you want to finish?
No, go ahead.
I've loved technology for years. I've loved it. And then I've thought, but I don't like what we do with it. But I've been the first to go, oh my God, AI is so interesting. I want to be different when it comes to blockchain, because a future based in unreal us. We will not be real. We will be database entries that are ultimately connected in our digital twin, and our digital twin will be worth more than us.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
We'll lose rights. Yeah, we'll lose the rights to our twin because our twin has somehow signed up with some Netflix thing that it's watching, and we will have to fight for it to have it back. And this is what will happen with blockchain, immutable chains of events. And so I'm desperately trying to find a way of dealing with this without going, oh my God, it's lovely, it's amazing. I've written my own blockchains it's just a way of collecting up data and dispersing it, if you like. It's such a simple thing. I don't want it to turn into this solution, but I don't know how to stop it.
It's almost like the question was saying, asking, so what are you worth? And you think, well, what am I actually worth? Is it money? Is it interpersonal social skills? What am I worth at interview? Imagine you job interview. So nice to meet you, Zoe. What are you worth? And you think, because that's what it's all about ultimately now, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be much better than tell me about the last time you did something really bad and learned something.
Yeah, it's how you assign value and worth to objects, to yourself, to everything, isn't it? Really now.
Yeah, and my digital self is likely to be doing the work, not me.
Yeah.
Is that a bad thing though? If we take it a different direction, if we take a different lens, that your digital self, if all the data is captured, and if we believe that it's infallible, I'm not saying that that's the truth, but with this conversation, if that data is infallible, when we look at the face we put forward with our socials, where we only put up good things, where we only when somebody says something to us that challenges our way of thinking, that we get all tense and oh, don't you disrespect me. It's all about saving face. If we take all of that mishigas away and it comes down to whatever these factoids that are being held by some digital in our digital twin. You know, might that
there was a brilliant, sorry, Jonathan, I just got so excited. There was a fabulous story yesterday on the news about a man in the UK, I believe, who had been sent his appointment for his COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out that he's only 34, but he'd been recorded as morbidly obese because instead of saying he was 6 foot, he'd been recorded as 6 inches. The film, the joy you could have with that, honestly, that made me absolutely crack up. So I worry a little bit about the data.
Rashida asked a question in the chat. Can we ask the question, what are the impacts of data sharing and AI on our social life, on us connecting, not data, and not data connecting us, being that it's more emotional than monetary? I think that comes down, a lot of that is what we were talking about before. It's like, what is that value? Is it a financial value, or is it a personal, how we interact with others? Mitch, you were going to say something, you were going to answer.
Well, I was actually looking at the last part of it. It's more emotional than monetary. And what that led me to is that this whole idea of money is just a social construct. And it's an agreement that we all make with ourselves. And because it's an agreement, it's not, you know, we could change that. And it's just a matter of saying, no, I don't accept that this is the value anymore. And we can change it, each of us individually, and that can have profound effects on the way we live our lives. And if enough of us do that, they can have profound effects on the way, as a society, we start changing the way, as a society, we live.
I discovered a company yesterday called Fabricant, and it sells purely digital fashion. And the item that I was interested in had sold out. And it goes into partly what Rashida is asking, is that just that fakeness or the unreality of limited things in a digital world, or am I losing my way? Jonathan?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin is ostensibly a non-tangential digital element that is not limitless, right? There are limitations on it.
Oh, I know. And there's lots of games that have treasure troves that you can buy into. I understand that. But this had just sold out. Oh, yeah, I guess, yes. Just have to.
And it's an arbitrary sold out also, right?
Yeah, and it's been
somebody
going
just decided, right?
Yeah. Like
you're an artist, and prints are created, and you set a run of how many prints you're going to do. The source could even be digital. It could be a computer generated piece, but you decide I'm only going to run 100 copies of it.
Yeah,
you know,
I've
so
understood where if I buy a book, I can share it, but on Audible, I can't. It's in its most shareable format. Going
back to the vaccination thing and trying to get it to other countries, there's a cynical aspect to it that people, I in some ways, I'm one of them. People want to be traveling again, and they want to be able to go to the exotic places, because this time of reflection, it says, you know what? I need to get out. I need to do things that I never was able to do before. So I want to go to those places of Africa. Those places of Africa are not going to be available because they can't get the vaccines there. So when is that going to open up? As soon as we feel safe, my family, we've decided, because of these new rules, and I hate to even call them rules because we were thinking this before the pandemic hit, we just took it as the opportunity to say, we are leaving the country. Not because we're upset with the politics, but because we want to experience for ourselves and with our kids to go from country to country, spending at least 2 to 3 months in each country, and make it, and we're calling it world learning or world schooling. And the thing that's holding us back right now is the fact that we can't go anywhere, you know? And so there is that cynical part of me that's, you know, once you get enough of these wealthy people in power that really want to be able to visit these exotic places and realize they can't because these places haven't gotten to the point of vaccination to allow it. Oh, we got to push the vaccines there, which is,
well,
really...
You've got the Australian Open tennis at the moment, haven't you? where you've got Australians who have been stranded outside of their own country, not able to go home, and yet the tennis stars are coming in. It's amazing what a valuable sport
Right.
franchise can do against what we can.
And the wealthy people that you're talking about, Jonathan, from my perspective, they will construct walls of some type so that they can do where they go, and they'll be protected in some type of a bubble from the people who aren't protected. So if they want to go to India, they will construct some type of an enclave in India that they can go to, where everybody in that enclave is protected. But the other 1.29 billion people in India.
No, it's interesting. Now that you say that, even in Hawaii, Four Seasons on Maui has effectively done a bubble. So you pay a certain amount of money, you get picked up at the airport, you get driven to the Four Seasons, and everything is secure there. You know, you have to do the proper testing, but once you're there, like, you don't have to wear masks or anything.
Okay, I'm in.
And Jonathan, going back to COVID, and you were talking about like a world education. My daughter and her husband and children they're flying to Florida like on Sunday. They've got to get out, right? They've got to go. It's been really with the snow and all of that, and then COVID on top of it. It's really quite challenging right now, right, on both fronts. So,
Right.
But the beauty of it all, because of COVID now, learning will continue on for my grandchildren. They're going to plug in virtually, so they'll go to school, but they're going to be in a totally different location. That opens up tremendous amount of world experience for them that they've never had before. I mean, that's a huge shift, and
Yes.
I think it's a great shift. But that's
a lot of people can't afford that. There'll be so many people that at home that, you know, they don't have Wi-Fi. They're sharing a mobile phone to their schoolwork. They've not even got bread and milk. So those kinds of things, if you can afford it, it's the one. But for a lot of people, that's just, you know, that's like fantasy. That's just like watching television. It won't happen for them because they don't have the money, and they don't have the technology anyway, so they can't do it. Can't do either.
Yeah, a whole nother kind of bubble, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the poverty bubble.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, which is very hard to burst out of.
And Julie, I just want you to know, I didn't mean to like say, or like.
No, I know you didn't. I'm just kind of saying, you know.
But I think absolutely, your point is definitely.
Yeah. And that's where important. The divide is, isn't it? And that's what, after COVID, that was the bigger divide. The wealthy, so they'll have their bubbles overseas. And if you can afford it, you can do it. The rest of everyone else will like reality TV, won't it? Where you sit and watch everyone else do everything, and you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Rashida's just coming in with. I wanted to say that data is more important to us individuals in some cases, in medicine, schools, transport, but not in all aspects of our lives. So in some, I'm assuming some places it's incredibly important. And there was a movement, and I can't remember who headed it up in the UK. If Ava was here, she would tell us, where you actually own your own data and it sits just under your skin and it's in a little capsule and you give or you do not give people access to it. But where you do give access is to your doctor when it's needed, so that it's actually there as you require it, so that it actually saves your life. Whereas in other instances, clearly it's something that's impeding or affecting in a bad way.
Yeah, that's one of the main points that we were putting out years ago about the possibilities of blockchain, where you control all of your data, not Facebook, Google,
yeah, you don't
Amazon
need blockchain to do that. You need the reverse of blockchain in a way.
No, but in terms of having it, because for us, the fact that blockchain allows microtransactions or has an actual transactional element, so that I could say that an advertiser has access to my data, but they're going to actually pay me for that. But from a medical perspective, yes, I'll give you this access, but it's only for 2 weeks, or you can use this data for much larger research, but it's under these guidelines. Or I'm traveling, and so in my data packet, in my block, you have access to my passport information, my, this other, where the hotel that I'm staying, so I don't have to fill out any documentation as I'm getting off the plane, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that you still, yeah, anyway.
30 seconds, 1 minute.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Ah! So, Rashida, I think the use of data is one of the biggest questions that everybody should be tackling. Everybody should be asking. Everyone, as Jonathan was saying, should be able to manage their data. We should be able to revoke the use of our data. We should be able to suck everything in that we've created or is known about us and be given a chance to reset. But that's not going to happen. But it is one of the biggest issues that people still don't fully understand. And it's got to be an ongoing, very important topic.
Well, Rashida, maybe you already saw the documentary, The Social Dilemma. If not, I invite you to see it and also to get connected, because the Center for Humane Technology in San Francisco are doing webinars every week, inviting people free, and you can start like hearing what they try to do, which is in part kind of what you are asking.
All right, well, let's just draw to a close then. Well, I really enjoyed that. Thanks, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you again in a month's time when we'll be reviewing the education work.
If I can end on an optimistic tone, this what we're embarking on as a society over, who knows, the next 10, 20, 100 years is crazy intense. It could seem insurmountable, but we have seen in history society overcoming much more. And I'm sure at that point people were saying, there's no way this is ever going to be done, and it was done. So I hope that we all take that positive thinking forward, and really keeping on prodding the beast and seeing where we can poke to get a response to start affecting change. Like that's the whole reason why we started this Augmented Society Network. It's like, how can we augment a better future for society? And it's not just technology. It's not just systems. It's all of these pieces, which I think is brilliant. The people that we constantly have coming back and being in the conversation and opening up the thoughts to what is possible is really exciting. I'm honored to be a part of it. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all next month.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.